Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council informational meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Where'd Kermit go? Call to order this meeting, informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council, Tuesday, June 30th, 2015. First item on the agenda would be City Council open discussion. Do we have any? Councilman Jameson.
I was just going to update the council that on instead of a fiscal committee meeting next council meeting day, we thought we'd just leave that time available to Dave Bixler to talk maybe a little more about the budget plan and schedule and concerns, questions we might have, and any initial indications that he might have. But I thought that might be a more valuable use of our time, and so if you're okay with that. That's all I had.
Any other items for open discussion? Okay, let's go to our presentations then. The first only presentation we have would be the Complete Streets project. We have Mike Cooper leading off, I believe, then.
Good afternoon, council members. Thanks for letting us bring this to you today. We want to give you an overview of a proposal that we're calling Complete Streets. We've had this presentation to I believe it was Land Use Committee, and we are now presenting it to you today at the informational meeting as a kickoff to a request that will be on your council agenda next week to formally consider approving a Complete Streets policy. So today we want to go through what exactly that involves and how we got to that point. We put together a steering committee that involves a number of city departments. As the project sponsor, we've included Planning and Building Services along with Sioux Area Metro. Mark Cotter is representing Public Works, Joe Franken Community Health, and Deborah Gajkowski is the project manager. There's been a number of people working behind the scenes on this, and a couple of those are going to be actually giving you the overview today. In terms of background, looking back about 3 years ago, through the effort of our community health department, we did a citywide status report just to kind of look at some metrics of where we are in terms of a community compared to other communities. And as one of the outcomes of that status report, we established what we call the Live Well Sioux Falls program. And that has been led by community health. One of the strategic priorities of that Live Well Sioux Falls program is looking at ways that we can promote planning, development, and design of our community to make healthy living easy and accessible. And one of the ways of doing that we're going to talk to you about today is called Complete Streets Project. We have a number of guidelines and documents and policies that in some ways are the beginning points of guiding a Complete Streets policy development. We have our 2035 Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan that was adopted in 2009. We have our long-range transportation plan that we're now in the process of updating, and that's looking out 25 years into the future. We have a sustainability plan that the Public Works team championed. We also have a Sioux Falls Bicycle Master Plan that we'll also be bringing to you in the near future as an update. So within these different documents, there are components of what would be considered a complete streets policy, but we wanted to kind of bring it together into more of a formal structure and more of a formal policy that really says what the support to the City of Sioux Falls is going to be looking forward. And this is really nothing unique to Sioux Falls. As of today, there's more than 700 different agencies at the local, regional, and state level that have adopted a complete streets policy. So to tell you what is a complete streets, what are they, we're going to turn this over to Mary Michaels. Mary? There you go.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Mary Michaels with the Sioux Falls Health Department and the Live Well Sioux Falls initiative. We're really excited to be here to talk with you about this today because it's something that enhances a number of aspects of our community life. And before we can really talk about the policy itself, we're just going to provide some quick background about what is complete streets, what does that term mean, and what can it mean for our community. So when we talk about a complete street, that means it's an integrated, connected network of streets that are safe. They're designed to be accessible to anyone, all ages, all abilities. And that could mean whether they're walking, whether they're bicycling, whether they're using public transit, or they're driving a car. It's really all modes of transportation, all ages, all abilities. And so when you have these features in your community where you have this connected network that's safe and accessible, you support overall safety, health, but also economic development because you're creating an aspect of quality of life and a community that people want to come to and live in and be part of, and they are able to access different services, shopping, retail, school, work, play, all in that safe, connected environment. There's national organizations. There's the National Complete Streets Coalition, Smart Growth America, Active Living Research, and more of these organizations are out there helping communities, counties, and states develop this kind of a complete streets approach. The nice thing about it is that it can be tailored to fit any size community. So what does a complete street look like? One of the great examples we have right here in Sioux Falls is Main Avenue. And here you'll see some of the before and after pictures of what was called the Main Avenue Road Diet. And a road diet simply means you're taking a street that was primarily designed for moving traffic through relatively quickly and slowing that traffic down, and also adding elements that are in there for those other modes of transportation. So when you look at these before and after pictures, you can see before the 3 lanes of traffic, and the after picture, you see the 2 lanes of traffic, you see some additional parking, you see pedestrian bump outs. You're bringing that crossing island out a little bit to give pedestrians a shorter distance to get across the street. Maybe it involves signal timing to make sure there's plenty of time for that pedestrian to get across the street, or maybe somebody on a bike, somebody in a wheelchair, in a scooter, a mom or dad with a stroller, to make sure that's safe for them to get across that street. But then there's also amenities that can be added as well. Streetscape, landscaping, street trees, benches, bike parking, all of those different elements that make people want to come down to that place. So it's one thing to add elements that make a street a complete street, whether that's the bike parking or shortened pedestrian crossings, signals, roundabouts, but you also have to have places that people want to walk and bike to, and this connects that network. There's also the transit stops and all those things that connect all modes of transportation. These are some other examples right here in Sioux Falls. Again, the roundabouts that we have added, it slows that traffic down, making it safer not only for anybody who might be on foot or by bike, but it makes it safer for the drivers. It can also decrease costs because you're not needing additional signal lights and other things in that roundabout area. Sidewalks are part of complete streets. You're giving that pedestrian a safe place to walk and a buffer from the traffic. Bike lanes, sharrows, the transit stops, all of those things are part of complete streets. So when we started to look at this, we realized that there are many of these things that are really happening already in Sioux Falls. We have some great visionary planners and engineers who are incorporating some of these elements into some of the projects that you've seen in the pictures. But what a complete streets policy does is really formalizes that into a vision for where we want our city to grow and go and be a safe, healthy, designed city. And so we looked at what other communities were doing, and there are different approaches that cities, counties, states take in going towards a complete streets approach. What we have done with a project team that included health, planning, public works, parks and rec, and transit was to draft a resolution that you'll be hearing momentarily a little bit more about. And that's what sets the vision and some of those national guidelines and standards and best practices that we would be following. It also includes some direction for implementation. How are we going to carry out this vision? And that would continue to be an interdepartmental team working on that implementation and using a checklist on all of the different roadway projects to ensure that those different elements for pedestrians, transit, bikes, ADA accessibility, all of those things would be considered and reviewed as part of every project. Now, not every project is appropriate for a complete streets approach. And that's also allowed for in that checklist, that there might be some exceptions, places that you might not put a bike lane if it's a busy street, an arterial, but there might be an alternative street where you could look at adding a bike facility. And so that's what that checklist will really do, is help implement that vision. And we've seen case studies now of success stories of complete streets approaches. The U.S. Department of Transportation evaluated almost 40 different complete streets approaches from different projects around the country and found that just in 1 year's time, almost $18 million was in cost due to collisions and injuries was reduced because of the elements that were added as part of complete streets. So we have health benefits. People are more active if they're walking and biking and even using transit as part of their daily life because they're walking and biking to that bus stop. They're more active, a healthier community, but it also drives some economic development. There's an organization called Walk Score that evaluates communities and their what amenities people can walk to and that overall environment, if it's safe, attractive, accessible. And the higher the Walk Score, they have found that housing values go up, office rents go up, retail sales go up. And many of these communities that have been adding walking and biking projects have seen a return on investment of $20 for every $1.50 spent. So there are all these proven studies out there that we can actually show that there are some measures that we can follow as well, looking at decreases in crashes, increases in revenues, increases in miles of trail or bike walk. And so that's part of the implementation work we'll be doing, is looking at what are those measures that would be appropriate for Sioux Falls. So to take you into what the resolution says, I'm going to turn this over to Sam Trebilcock.
Thanks, Mary. Well, I'm going to take you through the resolution. So hopefully you have that in front of you. So try to take you through the components so you get a kind of an idea of exactly what we're asking of you in terms of consideration here. Really, as the first part of the resolution goes into quite a few whereas statements. Mike has talked about some of those already. Mary has talked about those some more. That's kind of the things that we've already established as a part of this, whether or not it's in the plans that we have in place or some of the work that we're trying to model this off of. These are the things that we are looking to move from. These are the things that we've already done. The last whereas statement is the vision, which I have on the slide here also. I think it's important enough that we go through this. This is kind of what our overall vision is for complete streets, this resolution. In red there, the applicable part is to improve public health, economic development, the environment, while also reducing transportation costs, enhancing community connections, promoting social equity, and making healthy living easy and accessible. So again, that's our vision for this resolution. Second, what is our core commitment? What are we trying to do here? First of all, we're trying to include all users and modes are included in the street design. So again, as a part of this, I've put this section, and by the way, the sections 1 and 3, the numbered sections 1 and 3 are applicable to core commitment. So section 1 identifies that we're making sure all users and modes are included within the design of any street in Sioux Falls. So in this case, The City of Sioux Falls adopts complete streets policy to design and construct all new city transportation improvement projects as provided below, everything below number 1, to accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, motorists, and persons of all abilities while promoting safe operations for all users. So again, we're not just looking at car drivers. We're looking at all other modes. And that's the important thing to note about complete streets is we're looking and trying to do a complete street for all modes. Also, early consideration of street projects and phases. We don't want to just look at it at the end of the game, at the end of design. We want to look at it at the beginning of each phase. And again, within number 1, the planning and design of all street projects, we shall give due consideration to those bicycles, to all those different modes from the very start of planning and design work for the roadway projects. Within each, typically within each, and we thought it was also very important here that we look at exceptions. There are certain situations or certain projects that we wouldn't find it necessary at that point in time to open up and change everything on the street corridor. We think we kept it fairly minor, but there are certainly applicable situations. In this case, it's number 3. The complete street policy will apply to all street projects except under one or more of the following conditions as determined by the city engineer. Ordinary maintenance and activities and pavement preservation activities. Design features that would put roadway users at relatively high safety risk. Again, Mary was kind of indicating that roadway, just because of its, maybe the speeds are very high, the volumes are very high, and all that attributed. You wouldn't, for instance, do that on an interstate or something like that. Also, design features that would impose excessive and disproportionate costs in relation to the need or probable use. So by making it a complete street, it would be such a high cost, you're not going to receive the benefit from that because of such a high cost. We do leave that as an exception. Best practices, first of all, design guidance and flexibility within section 2. We talk about that in this case would follow generally accepted engineering design. We're not going to just make up anything. It is going to come from these type of design literature, including AASHTO, ITE, NACTO. If you're going to ask, what all the acronyms, I certainly can give those to you, and the Architectural Transportation Barriers Compliance Board. For instance, NACTO has a fairly detailed design guidance for things that allow for some non-traditional, more flexible design standards that we can bring to Sioux Falls and fit in for some complete streets, and all the other agencies do also that are listed there. Also under best practices are connected network and context sensitivity. Essentially what that talks about is within number 4. We think it's important that you look at the context of what you're doing and also where you need to develop your connections to help you prioritize where complete streets are the most important. And so that's what this is really talking about here, is that in some cases where there's significant destinations or where there's a natural man-made barrier or a natural barrier, that those things might lead, if there's a small connection that could be made, that complete streets might be a more important project to provide that. It might provide a bigger benefit. We also list other things there, whether the roadway corridor provides important continuity and connectivity to links for an existing trail, such as our bicycle trail. That might be important to get to the trail. People are trying to get there. So that might help raise the priority as part of the context or the connections that are trying to be made. Last is the implementation plan. That's within section 5. And that talks about updating some of our ordinances and engineering design standards. That's essentially highlighting, yes, that this is important for us to take a look at. And identify some important areas. We talk about in 5B some of the kinds of things that Mary was talking about that we should be looking at and updating some of our engineering design standards. Things that might help reduce the crossing distance, improve things for the bicycle, use pedestrian scale elements, evaluate the use of traffic calming features, consider streetscaping where appropriate. All those kind of things are listed within here, to identify that those are things that we would target for us to be looking at for updates in our engineering design standards and updates to our ordinances and policies. Also within there, we identify performance measures that would be needed. As Mary talked about, that's something that we'd be identifying as we get into some of the updates as part of our implementation plan. And also coordination of departments. It's very important that all the departments work together, become trained, so that they know throughout the design process that early on that this is something that's going to be a priority. With that, that's kind of run through the quick of the ordinance. I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Cooper for a wrap up.
So why is a Complete Streets program important from our standpoint in presenting this to the City Council for your support? As Mary showed you, we are already implementing components of this. The example of the downtown Main Avenue Road diet that was supported by the City Council, the recent reconstruction of West 41st Street that had a number of components of a Complete Street program as part of that design and construction. And that also went through a number of reviews, not only at the city staff level, but also at the public level. But we believe that by bringing this to the City Council, it's important because it really says the City Council, along with the administration, believes that this is a high priority to have more of a formal way of reviewing street projects in the future to address these different components. And it's important to remember that this is not only going to apply to projects that are being funded by the city through our CIP program, but in some cases also developer projects. And we've already had discussions with different developers that are starting to see the benefits of Complete Streets components. As Mary said, one of the measures is economic development. So if you're putting together a retail center, should you have bicycle parking? Should you have pedestrian and bicycle access to your facility in addition to the parking lot? And we know that there's going to be growing interest in the private sector of working with us on some of these aspects as well. And the good part about this, as Sam talked through with you, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all checklist. We're going to be able to analyze, in some cases it makes sense, both common sense and financial sense, to include components of a Complete Streets, but in some cases it may not, and there may not be alternatives. But at least this gives us a methodology that we can sit down as a staff and review both publicly funded projects as well as private development proposals. And in terms of support, it's really across the board. The School Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, or PATH, is in support of this. The ADA Accessibility Review Board believes very strongly that having a Complete Streets program is going to be a benefit to the community for people that have limited ability to utilize some of our other transportation modes. PTAB, our Public Transit Advisory Board, because transit is a big part of a Complete Streets program. Park and Recreation Board, in support of this, in looking at how we better connect not only open space and recreation areas, but also looking at how we can just make the public more active. And that's one of the health benefits as well. And of course, the Board of Health. And as I always listen to Mary Michaels go through her overview, she has so much energy and push for this to happen that how can we say no to her? But we'll see. So with that, we're ready to answer any questions that you have. And again, We are going to be putting this resolution on your agenda next Tuesday night for your consideration.
Councilor Urfenbach.
Thanks. Question for Mike and then a question for Mary. Mike, talk about how this works how a resolution works for your staff. How is this different from maybe if you'd created a list of administrative rules that your team would just follow internally? And how's it different from an ordinance that we might have passed, to make it law in the city? How do you guys work inside a resolution like this?
The resolution that we looked at, we believe is the best way to approach this in terms of outlining more of a policy approach, because the city council, that's one of your challenges or charges, is to establish policy. Because a Complete Streets program involves a number of different implementation methods. So in terms of, it would not be appropriate to say by ordinance we're going to make you do this, this, and this, and make it very specific. The best part about the Complete Streets program is that it will allow the administration to put together checklists. And those checklists will be something that we can use, again, to analyze projects that are being funded by the city or other projects that are being proposed by developers. So it gives us a little more flexibility to make the best decisions as we move forward. And so that's again why we believe that this is the best approach for us.
Okay. Then a question for Mary, if I could. Mary, give us kind of historic context on this. I mean, if we look at these pictures and some of them look like parts of Sioux Falls look now, but some of them look like places we might have visited or the places we might have dreamed of. Can you talk about Complete Streets as how it fits in the larger picture? And really the essential question is Complete Streets a fad? Is this just something really cool to do for now, and then 5 years from now we'll say, forget that, we're going to do partial streets and a new kind of way to do stuff? Can you talk about that?
I think, if it was just a fad, I don't think we'd see, over 700 different jurisdictions already doing this work. And the more we see the economic development benefits of it, that businesses are wanting to come to communities that are connected like this. We see every day in the news, there's some news story about both millennials and about retirees and where they want to live. And both ends of the spectrum are wanting to live where they don't have to rely on their car all the time. In fact, there was another study that came out recently that showed that half of people over the age of 65 stay home on any given day because they don't have access to transportation. So either they don't have a car, they're not driving, or they don't feel comfortable walking, or they can't get to a bus stop. And so that's not going to change. Our population is going to continue to age, and we're going to continue to have those younger people coming into the workforce. And as we look at wanting our community to grow and attract business and have businesses that are here grow and recruit more people, we have to have the kind of community that these individuals are wanting to live in. And there's, reports about, when a lot of communities do a closed street, like an open street event where it's closed to cars but open to pedestrians and bikes and other modes of transportation for special events or on a weekend. When that happens, crime goes down 74%. You have people that are out there connected, they're getting to know their neighbors, they're watching out for each other. And so there's so many other benefits that I think that once people are enjoying these benefits, it's not something they want to go back from. And so we do have many examples here, but when you go around the city, you see places where a sidewalk starts but maybe isn't finished, or you might still see some neighborhoods where there's not sidewalks at all and kids are walking, or biking to school maybe, in an environment that might not be the safest route. And that includes, Complete Streets approach impacts them too, and ensuring safe routes to schools. And so again, it's kind of that all ages encompassing. And there's an organization nationally called the 8 by 80, I think, and it's when you create a community that is safe and accessible for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you're also making it that way for everybody in between. And so that's the approach that we're taking.
Well, if I might just make a comment, then it looks very much like the small towns that many of us grew up in, where when we talked last week about being free-range kids, we were because we grew up in small towns where everything was accessible and it was easy to ride your bike and easy to walk places. And so that's what it looks like to me. Historically, it looks like kind of a step back to maybe more common sense, as was mentioned earlier. It is a little bit, and that's why you hear so much about mixed use and, places where you can live, work, shop, play, pray, kind of all in that same vicinity. And exactly, there's, and I'm not saying there are not
legitimate safety concerns out there. You know, when you talk about having kids being out and playing, but I think most of us grew up in that era where you went out at dawn and you didn't come home till your mom was out on the porch screaming both your first and your middle name. and that's, you know, can we get back to that, you know, mode in all neighborhoods? You know, maybe not exactly to that point, but how can we make it better so that we do have kids and neighbors and families out connecting together and building that community?
Good, thank you.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Mary, if I can ask you, here in the information you've given us, you've talked about what are complete streets. And then point number 2, streets designed to make walking and bicycling convenient. So is it fair to say that this is really what this is all about? It's designed to promote bicycling, it's designed to promote walking and things like that, and to reduce the use of cars.
This is about all modes of transportation. So we know that there are places in Sioux Falls that it's appropriate and necessary to reach by car. So we want the roads to be safer for cars, for buses, for bicyclists, for motorcyclists, for, you know, anybody, any mode of transportation. Because when you have people all watching out for each other, you make it safer for everyone. So it's not it's not about just taking the cars off the road. That wouldn't be appropriate. It's about making it safe for everybody.
Because there are other cities that are trying to do that, to promote less use of cars and promote bicycling and walking. And if that's what they want to do, you know, they can go ahead and do it. But I was just wondering if we were moving in that direction.
This is simply about creating our transportation network to be safer. Now, there are benefits, health benefits, if you choose to walk or bike. But the thing that's important about this is that while we may choose to go out and walk or bike on any given day, there are many in our community that can't make that choice. They have to. Their feet, their bicycle, that's their only mode of transportation because they can't afford, they choose not to own a car. And so we want to make sure that those alternate forms of transportation are available in a safe, accessible network.
If I could just say that's fine. If they just want to, you know, bike or walk, that's perfectly fine. Do you know how many people in Sioux Falls fall into that category? That just don't want to use a car, but they want to bike or walk or whatever.
Do you have any comment necessarily?
We haven't done any counts, but there is certainly a small number of people that do want to bike, and there's a growing number that want to bike to work. But what we find quite a bit now is that there's a lot of people that's their only option. And we see quite a few, whether or not it's through income or whether or not it's, you know, in other options, they have our transit riders. That might be the only way they can get there, and they don't have the option for a car. So that's part of the reason for a complete street also, is that we're looking at the need for anybody to be able to use the street system.
Can we get some numbers on those people? I mean, if we're going to, you know, be implementing a program like this, we should have some kind of idea of how many people there fall into that category.
I think, and we could get some of those numbers for you, I think, but what really Complete Streets is trying to do is to increase that number, because you're probably right, the number is probably lower than we'd like. Without a complete street, you're not going to get people to use the street for other kinds of modes because it's not safe, comfortable, or accommodating. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Councilman Jameson.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment a couple things. It's unfortunate we don't have anybody at Livewell that's energized about this program. Really exciting to see Mary is so excited about it. That's good. We need that. You know, the timelines for these kinds of roads to get caught up within our city are pretty extensive, and it's just good planning, I think, to have engineering involved in the discussion ahead of time, because, as you know, a lot of the arterial roads are built out pretty far in advance, and the neighborhoods are getting built out. It's going to be a while before we ever see another large stretch of arterial road built someplace new. But when we redo Minnesota Avenue and redo 41st Street, if they've got a kind of a comprehensive plan in mind and it's been designed with engineering with these thoughts in mind, it's going to serve us well. But it's going to take a while, probably, before you ever see a new road get built with these design standards. But to have everybody on the same page, I think is going to serve us well in the future. So I support the program. This is my second time through it as a member of land use. So, I appreciate the work.
Any other questions from the council? Sam, if you could, I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. East 41st Street between Southeastern and Sycamore.
Yes.
Now, is that marked off for bicycle traffic also? There's a solid line.
Yeah, there is, and as you drive that corridor, you'll notice the bicycle lanes that are there that do go from Southeastern almost out to, not quite out to Highway 11.
I think it goes pretty close.
Yeah, and that was probably 4 or 5 years ago that those were included.
That is what I wanted to use as an example of what I see. I see a lot of vehicles utilizing that space. And I felt that it's really unsafe for runners or people utilizing bicycles because there's not enough signage. As far as what you were showing here in this example, the markings that would go down on the road,
right? I
would like to see more of those. I am for this program. I think it's a good idea, but I also think that as we educate the public and that as the drivers out there in vehicles get used to these new roads or new markings, that we make them as clear as possible.
Yeah, and I think we would agree as part of this program that it's the exact same thing that we hear from what other communities are doing, is that you need to have enough information there for the people to understand what it's all about. Yeah, agreed.
And that was the only point I wanted to make on that. It was something that I've noticed. I go out on that road a lot during the week, and I've noticed a lot of vehicles on that. So I thought that was something that could be utilized as a great example of just taking that step up a little bit.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I'm going to take a moment to give our city clerk a little privilege to send out a message.
Thank you, Kenny. I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege. Today is my grandson's first birthday, so happy birthday to Calvin Lee Jorgensen. Grandma loves you very much. And thank you for the promotion to city clerk, Kenny. Thank you.
Anything else from council? All right. The potential executive session is no longer needed and has been canceled. So at this point in time, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.